Hey, what's up, guys? We're up here. So I don't know about you, but it feels like we're entering a new era of censorship. Whether it's the new age verification system that has gone into effect in the UK, or the looming ban on VPNs that also is existing in the UK, or the fact that similar bills are being introduced to the United States, or the fact that thousands of games have been banned across multiple platforms, it really feels like censorship is ramping up at an alarming rate. Now, when anyone says, woke is dead or censorship is dead, they're not seeing the full picture. This stuff is still alive as ever. Censorship is being pushed extremely hard right now, and you can see there's pushback. Visa and Mastercard are getting overwhelmed by gamer fury over censorship, and that happens after thousands of games have been banned thanks to the efforts of small groups that are targeting these payment processors and making them put pressure on these platforms to ban certain games. And it's working, and that is the part that is really scary. It's not just the 18 plus hentai games or stuff like that. It's also horror games. That's the new development we're looking at today. And on top of that, there's way more to look at when it comes to Collective Shout, the main group that is initiating all of this. They're even going as far as to start making these vague threats against content creators who dare to call out their lies and BS. Now, it's not all doom and gloom today. Here's a good piece of news before we get into today's topic. So, as many of you are already aware, I have a summer drop with Advanced GG that just launched a couple days ago. And right now, until the 1st, if you use code REV20 at checkout, you'll get 20% off your order from these items. And you can see I got my new flavor jars, the Rev's Shark Bait Lemonade flavor here. Rev's Rocket Pop has returned with a new label. This is a fan favorite flavor. And then we have Rev's Based Berry Blast, which is a new flavor. It's berry based, obviously. And you can see those 3 flavor jars and also some new clothing as well. This is new stuff here. You can pre-order, and also one of our ice shakers have been brought back, so you can pair that up with a flavor jar if you so choose. I'll put a link to this in the pinned comment. And again, use code REV20 at checkout to save 20% off this new drop. All of the support on this is greatly appreciated, and it leads to future campaigns as well. Thanks, guys, for the big support on this. Now let's get back into today's topic. So, about a week ago, we talked about this group called Collective Shout. In their description, they say a grassroots campaign movement against the objectification of women and sexualization of girls in media, advertising, and popular culture. This is a very small group of feminists based out of Australia who, after many years of tiny victories, all of a sudden claims responsibility for thousands of games being banned across multiple platforms. And as you can see, their account is private because they're losing the plot. They're losing the war on social media. The free speech campaign where people are criticizing them, they're getting hammered, whether it's directly through this account or their employees. They're getting smashed because they are nothing but people trying to push their agenda. They are masquerading as some sort of effort to save young girls from exploitation, but in reality, their efforts don't line up with what they're doing. In fact, they put way more importance on video games than they do protecting actual children. This is a giant farce. This is their attempt at controlling the narrative and getting games banned across the way, including horror games, as we will see in just a moment. Basically, Collective Shout is a useful idiot. Basically, they opened the door. They somehow found the golden way of approaching these bans, and that is putting pressure on payment processors. And now the floodgates have opened, and everyone's jumping in the door they just opened, and now, well, games are getting banned by the thousands, and things are looking really bad. Like I said, they got small victories over the years. I mean, this was something they celebrated for a very long time, getting Target and Kmart to remove GTA 5 from their stores in Australia. Now, all these efforts were laughed at because the main account, as well as several of the employees of Collective Shout, have openly and viciously defended the Netflix film Cuties, which has sexually exploited hundreds of real children in its filming. In fact, you can see from the main account saying it's a powerful protest against the sexualization of girls. And how did Cuties achieve that goal? By sexually exploiting real children. It's literally a movie about 11 to 12-year-old kids doing a twerk off while wearing skimpy clothing. It's disgusting. It's exploitative material, and they defend that, but they want to ban games like GTA and even horror games, as we will see today. So, like I said, for years they were largely ignored, but they came up with a new strategy, and that is to put pressure on Visa and Mastercard. In case you don't know, payment processors like them dominate the field. If you lose Visa and Mastercard, if they remove their services from your platform, you're going broke. You've lost basically your entire monetization just like that. And people like myself, I hate to be like the person who said I told you so, but this happened in Japan about 2 years ago. That's when it started, when we saw this pattern and no one cared. A lot of people were basically saying, oh, well, who cares? The stupid hentai games have now been removed from stores and catalogs and what have you. And now it's expanding way beyond just that. And the people who are cheering on that censorship are going, whoa, wait a second. This isn't good. Because right now, this strategy has been extremely effective for Collective Shout. A very small group that should have no influence whatsoever has somehow gotten thousands of games banned in a very short period of time using this new strategy. And it's completely ridiculous. And even Steam is feeling the pressure, where they've made a new rule stating this: content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks or internet network providers, in particular, certain kinds of adult-only content. And that is very vague and very open. And guess what? It's backfiring, and it's being applied to way more than what people initially thought. I mean, who saw that coming? Yeah, all the people who were cheering on all these previous bans of especially Japanese games are now going, oh, wait a second. You're banning my ethical, totally normal games that also contain mature content. And now they're trying to complain about it, but it might be just a little too late. But anyways, another target of Collective Shout and these pro-censorship groups is itch.io, an open indie game marketplace. And they're feeling the heat quite significantly. In fact, the campaign against them is so ridiculous. Even PC Gamer, who's usually the kind of slop place you see saying the worst takes ever about gaming, even they recognize how ridiculous this is and how this is not going to accomplish anything to protect women like Collective Shout claims it will. And that basically this is going to result in a new sort of sidestepping of these platforms and rules into other places where they can still just keep on selling their games. But like I said, it's not just the gooner bait games, as people will say. We now have horror games getting caught in the mix. This post saying, Vile Exhumed is banned on Steam. Mouthwashing removed on itch.io. We will return to that in just a second. And then 3, Fear and Hunger shadow banned on itch.io. So there are horror games getting banned on Steam and shadow banned on itch.io. And this is a very concerning thing. And honestly, the natural conclusion of everything we've been talking about. This is how it's going to work. It's going to keep extending and extending and extending. And now some people are like, whoa, what's going on here? Well, people have been calling this out for years, and it got largely ignored. Now, of course, we have to talk about mouthwashing. On this post, it's reported as removed. I don't blame this person because there was a lot of misinformation going on yesterday. In fact, I'm glad I didn't talk about this yesterday and went with something else because there was a very confusing picture being made. So Mouthwashing is an indie game that was enormously successful, and it's one that came with an interesting set of controversies involving one of the people who worked on this game, as we will see in just a second. But this is the person right here, Martin, who said that yesterday, Mouthwashing got yoinked from itch search results, basically saying it's been shadow banned, right? And he down here says, not surprised, was kind of waiting for it to happen. And then someone asks, wait, why? And this is very important. He says, payment processors like Mastercard/Visa have been pushed by an activist group, Collective Shout, to deplatform not safe for work content on many major platforms, including itch. Collective Shout has tried to go after Steam, but were unsuccessful, so they started targeting payment processors instead. This paints a very clear picture that the payment processors were responsible for getting this removed, Collective Shout, through the payment processors. And things will get complicated. Number one, because people like Hypnotic or Grum's reporting on this are seeing their posts about it getting restricted, which has to do with the new UK age verification law that's gone into effect. That's a topic for another day. It's very complicated, having very widespread and unintended results. I think these results are very intended, but we'll talk about that another time, but just something to point out. Now, going back to Martin here, he's someone who worked on the audio and music of Mouthwashing, and he originally left a bad taste in the mouth, no pun intended, of many people who were playing this game or were interested in playing this game, because when Asmongold made a video not only defending an artist being harassed for making artwork of a character that people thought was problematic, he also went out and played the game and really enjoyed it and promoted it to his audience. And this is how Martin, as a member of the team that made the game, responded, saying, "The anti-woke crowd has found the game, and I feel sick to my effing stomach. Being on Twitter is going to be unbelievably painful from now on, that I don't know if I can be active on here. I don't have the energy for this." Well, unfortunately, things got more complicated yesterday when itch.io on Blue Sky as well as on Twitter made it very clear that Mouthwashing has not been indexed since October of 2024, since it doesn't meet their indexing criteria. And they're using a download button as a link to Steam. The developer took down any playable files from this page in 2024. So it has been basically a year since this game was down on itch.io. So way before any of this stuff involving Collective Shout. And of course, Martin would come on later and try to correct the record, saying that the delisting narrative he was sharing turned out to be false. Good on him for correcting the record, but a lot of people were rallying behind him, because despite his previous comments about Asmongold and other people who are anti-woke, people said, hey, you know what? We might not like those comments, but what's happening with Collective Shout and Mouthwashing, that's not cool, okay? Even though you disagree with some of the things he said, his game should still be allowed to exist without being taken down. And now the record's been corrected, and that's not what happened. And now it's just confusing, because there's only really two results. Either people like Martin were just not paying attention at all and somehow didn't realize this game wasn't even there for a year, basically, or they were trying to frame this in a way that made them look like a victim of Collective Shout and their agenda. Either way, it's not a great look, but at the end of the day, let's make this very clear. Just because Mouthwashing was not a victim of this campaign, there were other horror games that are, whether they're getting delisted on itch.io or banned on Steam. It's happening. So just because Mouthwashing is not a part of that does not erase what's happening right before our eyes. And Collective Shout is very, very proud of what they're doing. In fact, they made a Steam campaign timeline where they say this: in response to false claims and misinformation about our campaign, we're setting the record straight. Some have asked why we involved payment processors, and others have claimed we are responsible for itch.io removing all not safe for work content. We raised our objection to R-word and incest games on Steam for months, and they ignored us for months. Good, as they should. We approached payment processors because Steam did not respond to us. We called on itch.io to remove R-word and incest games that we argued normalize violence and abuse of women. Itch.io made the decision to remove all not safe for work content. Our objections were to content that involved sexualized violence and torture of women. So here they are once again making claims with no evidence about how this is leading to people being harmed in real life and all these things. But it appears very clear that they're proud of what they're doing. They're claiming this as a victory, and that this campaign where they're going after payment processors has been working. And also they were able to bully itch.io into removing all of their not safe for work content, which is cascading into places where you don't really expect, including horror games. And Steam was something they wanted to bully. They couldn't. So like a hall monitor, they went to the payment processors and went through them instead. And Unfortunately, it works. Now, there's something else very interesting going on with Collective Shout. As Bounding into Comics reports here, Collective Shout's staff are now stockpiling personal and family data on creators Smash JT and Madam Savvy and more. We need more evidence of these mafia-like tactics. Please keep an eye out for attempts from Collective Shout to dox their opposition. Fear is the only tactic they can trust. And that is something they have been doing through this individual, this L.S. Kennedy, who is an ethics, compliance, supply chain, corp governance and behavior, blah, 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 blah. They work for Collective Shout as a campaigner. Now, they have been crashing out nonstop on Twitter. I swear almost every single thing this person says gets ratioed into the shadow realm and also gets hit with a community note dispelling the lies they're sharing. And they make this long claim attacking Savvy in particular, basically saying she's lying, she's doing all this stuff wrong. And as you can see by the notes, the screenshots in question all bore connection to Savvy's arguments and were not at all dishonest or false whatsoever. No bullying was involved, only the spreading of public information. So yes, Savvy's been doing a lot of work exposing what's going on with Collective Shout. They don't like that, so they call her a liar, and here's all the proof. If you want to go through it yourself, do as you please, but it's very obvious she's raising valid concerns and valid points based on public posts, and this person's trying to deny it. And look at it. 36 likes versus 200 plus quotes dunking on them. And then down here, they say, as for our records, citing advocate for the illegal content gaming crowd, Madam Savvy and Smash JT, rubbished our winning campaign calling Brumby's Bakery to ditch a sexist slogan, workplace uniform tees, which put young female employees at the risk of sexual harassment. Yeah, they targeted a local bakery that had a shirt that said the best buns in town, of course referring to bread, a little joke, and they relentlessly went after them and were successful in basically bullying this small company into changing their ways. But down here, do Madam Savvy and married and father Smash JT think it's okay for employers to facilitate and invite the sexual harassment of girls in the workplace? Sounds like a bit of a threat, doesn't it? Why are you also including this? What are you trying to imply? They're definitely making a very vague threat towards these individuals, and that's not surprising. That's how these people operate. They operate on fear. They want to make you feel unsafe, and that's what they do. It's disgusting. And of course, they're mad at people like Savvy because they've been sharing information like this, that you can submit complaints about these companies to them. And that's something they're legally required to have available for people. And guess what? It's working. Because Visa and Mastercard are getting overwhelmed by the amount of emails and phone calls being made to them. And if you want to do these routes, all I ask is that you be respectful, you have a plan, right? You actually have something to say, a valid point or criticism or set of questions, and you do it in the most professional manner you can, because, you know, just calling up and saying a bunch of nonsense isn't going to help anything. But if you make a solid inquiry on what's going on here, I think you can do some really good things and help push back, because as they bullied these companies and these platforms into doing their will, the same thing can be done to remedy it as well. If you complain enough, something should happen. It's not a guarantee, but it's better than nothing, right? So it's going to be a long road. There's a lot going on. Like I said, it feels like we're in a new era of censorship, and there's so much more to talk about, and I will in the coming days, but this already was dragging on for almost 20 minutes, so we're going to end it here. So as always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.